And I said, "What's with the deer in the back, Mom?" And she goes, "Oh, it was on the side of the road. But don't worry, it was still warm." And I split it with a farmer. And she goes, "And the best part about this is I don't have to worry about Thursday night." And I'm thinking, really, what's Thursday night? Well, cut to Thursday night, and I'm taking coats and I'm serving because they put us to work. We have Pamela Harriman over for dinner and all those other folks. And we're serving my mother's favorite meal that she makes. It's very popular for venison. And everybody's eating, and the glasses are clinking, and you can hear the silver hitting the china, and everyone's having a wonderful time. The conversation is fascinating until they say, "Oh, Mrs. Brzezinski, this venison is amazing. Who is your caterer?" And without missing a beat, my mother says, "Oh, I don't use a caterer. I found that on the side of the road." And everybody froze. I froze with them. And Pamela Harriman spit it out. Literally, spit it out. It was in the style section of the Post, something about Bambi coming home from dinner or something like that. But this is what it was. My mother to this day, and even when this was in my book, which she didn't like the whole book, actually, she still to this day doesn't know what she did wrong. Because when you grow up in Eastern Europe during the war, you don't waste good meat. And so she thinks everyone else is wrong to think it's a little crazy. And that's actually how my parents got by in Washington, knowing who they are and really not caring what anyone else thinks, which is hard to do there, for sure. But yes, our parents are absolutely crazy, and I think that might be the bond.
No, it certainly helps. It certainly helps, but you know, speaking of Washington and knowing who you are, it's the thing that I found when I got up there. There were so many politicians that would go to Washington, and then they would forget why they got there.
Oh, would that be when you fell in love with Bill Clinton? Just completely fell for him?
Literally fell for him.
You never fell in love because you have a huge crush on him. Whenever they're together, it's unbelievable.
Republicans,
it makes me want to puke. Puke.
Yours now.
All right.
Just stop.
Talk about Bill Clinton.
I will have to run as an independent when I run for office here, okay? So Bill Clinton, you know, I ran against the guy. And when I was running in 1994, I didn't talk about my opponents. I talked about we need to go up to Washington and run against Bill Clinton. The guy drove me crazy. And he'd be like, "I'll feel your pain." I'm like, "He's lying! You know he's lying!" And so I got elected, and I went up there. And of course, the first thing you have to do when you go up to Washington, D.C. as a new congressman, you've got to meet the president, right? I said, "I'm not going to do it." They said, "You got to do it, Joe." So I end up going in to Washington, get to Washington, go to the White House, and I'm going to meet Bill Clinton. And it's just like, it was driving me crazy. And I still remember walking in, and I'm walking in with my wife, and I'm like, I can't stand this guy thing. You know, and then I turn and stop, and we're in the East Room. And there he is. Now I know, being from New Hampshire, a lot of you probably met Bill Clinton when he was here, right? First time you meet him, the guy looks like he's 8'4", right? You're like, wow, he's a president. Next time you meet him, he's like 7'2". Third time, I'm like, I got a couple inches on this guy. But anyway, the first time I met him, I'm like, wow. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he goes, "Hey, it's Joe Scarborough." And I turned to my wife, and I said, "He knows my name." The United States knows my name. And he comes up and he's shaking my hand. He's like, you know, if you ever met Bill Clinton, he's just great. You know, he's just all over you, whether you're a man or a woman. We're shaking hands. He's like, I've been to Pensacola in 1969. I sure would love to go back there. And I'm like, would ya? You know? And to win in '94, all you needed was a picture with your opponent and Bill Clinton. That is all you needed, right? So you'd think I would have been smart enough when the White House photographer came over and started taking pictures, not to go like this, straight off the farm. Pull my hand away, and I'm like, dear God, I am going to be primary this first night. And it was you know, I went home that night, of course. And, you know, snapped out of it. I was like washing my hands, like Lady Macbeth trying to get the stain out. I didn't like Bill Clinton. In fact, I think it's safe to say in 1994, the Republican Congress hated Bill Clinton. And I felt badly about this. I really did. I remember one time confessing to a member of the Clinton administration how badly I felt about hating Bill Clinton. He said, "Don't worry about it, Congressman. He hates you too." And yet, despite that fact, what did we do in the 1990s? We balanced the budget for the first time in a generation. And by the way, don't believe what anybody tells you about balancing the budget. I read article after article after article in 1995 telling us why the budget would never be balanced. We balanced it for the first time in a generation. We balanced it 4 years in a row for the first time since the 1920s. We passed welfare reform. We came together and supported the troops who won 2 wars, one in Bosnia, one in Kosovo. There were millions and millions of new jobs created. The tax code was flattened. I mean, there were so many things that were going well. And you know what? But then, of course, we impeached him in '99, but it was the '90s. You know, it was just, it seemed the thing to do, right? But think about it. Think about where we were then, and think about where we are now. John Kasich could sit down with Leon Panetta, and they could scratch and claw and kick each other. They could hold press conferences, and Bill Clinton could say, "Republicans just want to cut Medicare, throw Granny out in the street for tax cuts for the rich." And we could level charges against him, but then we'd sit down and we would talk. And say, you know what? We're in the same boat together. We either sail together or we sink together. And at the end of the day, we got the deal done. Every single time. You know why? Because in the '90s, we didn't think there was any other option. But today, it seems like both sides revel in the fact that they can get by without doing the deal. The fact of the matter is, we need cooperation more today than we ever did. Let me ask you this. How many baby boomers do we have in the audience tonight?
Do not answer
Stop
that.
it. How many baby boomers? No, stop it. How many baby boomers do we have in the audience?
He's going to insult you.
Sit down. This is my part. You talked about the deer. Let me talk about saving America. How many baby boomers do we have in the audience? You trust me? Just raise your hand. Go out on faith. Tonight. Go out on faith. You don't trust me, do you? All right. You're the scourge of humanity, baby boomers. In the '60s, you gave us Woodstock. Yeah, I bet you like that, hippie. In the '70s, you gave us disco and polyester. Yeah, in the '90s, Bill Clinton. I don't have to say any more. And now you're going to bankrupt us. Think about it. When FDR started in 1933, when he started Social Security, life expectancy was 62, right? And you got your check at 65. Now that's a pyramid scheme that even a conservative can live your whole life, and then you die before we give you a check. That worked. Actually, 40 people worked for every 1 person that drew a Social Security check. Today there are 3 people working for every 1 person that draws a Social Security and Medicare check. By the time baby boomers all go into retirement, there will be 2 people working. 2 people working for every 1 person drawing Social Security and Medicare. I know it's not as exciting as saying we've got to go invade a country and take their weapons away to save Western civilization. You know, maybe we could invade the Falkland Islands. I hear that's a good little war. But this is the battle of our time. It is. And it's not about ideology. I don't care what Republicans tell you, I don't care what Democrats tell you, this is not about ideology. It is about math. It is simple math. I go to the University of Alabama, okay? I've got a learning disability. Roll Tide, we're going to win tomorrow night. You know, most people that go to Alabama can't count. But then again, most people that go to Alabama don't have to count because we just count number one, baby. Roll Tide! I forgot I'm in the Northeast. You don't follow. Football. But it's all about math. You know, in the next 20 years, Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid is going to swallow up our entire budget. And yet we have Democrats telling us we don't have to do anything to entitlements. These are just right-wingers trying to scare us. And then we have Republicans saying we can take care of all the problems by cutting NPR. Big Bird is bankrupting us. And it's those weirdos that get money from the National Endowment of the Arts. Guess what? Republicans only want to cut from the 11% of the budget that invests in our future, that helps us win the century. Cutting education? Cutting R&D? Cutting infrastructure? The Chinese are doubling down. And because we don't have the guts to tell Americans that the math doesn't add up, we're going to gut the very programs that we can build our future on. You know, Dwight Eisenhower, in 1957, was faced with the challenge of Sputnik. Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, you know what he did? He didn't cut taxes. Say, I'm going to stimulate investment by lowering the capital gains tax by 3.4 and the marginal. No! He said, we have to get the federal government involved in science. We are going to invest in R&D. We're going to create a new generation of engineers, of scientists, of mathematicians. Do you know what that led to? That led to John Kennedy 4 or 5 years later being able to say, we're going to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade. And do you know why John Kennedy said we're going to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade? Go back and read the speech. It had nothing to do with the moon. It had nothing to do with Neil Armstrong walking on the moon in 1969. Instead, he talked about creating a new generation of engineers and scientists. Do you know the night that Neil Armstrong did walk on the moon in July 1969? I want to see how old I am. How many people remember that night? Okay. You're old too. Great. So, on that night, the average age of the engineer in mission control was 27. Think about how Ike's investment in 1957 and JFK's vision in the early 1960s shaped our economy over the next 40 to 50 years. And it was really, when you compare it to the defense budget, it was a really, really small percentage. So, we can do two things at once. We can plan for the future. We can slow down the rate of growth in entitlement programs. We can tell people, if you were born in 1960 or before, this doesn't involve you. Go into your kitchen and fix you up a pot pie, or whatever you eat in New Hampshire. But if you're born in 1960 or after, we're going to save Social Security, we're going to save Medicare, we're going to save this country's economy for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to do it by telling you, you will get Social Security and Medicare when you turn 70. And it's that simple. If we don't do something, you're not going to get it at all. You know, we got a $15 trillion debt right now. Soon it'll be a $16 trillion debt. Nobody on either side is doing anything seriously about it. And America's future is in danger. I'm not really, I listened to the debate this morning. I listened to the debate last night. I didn't hear anybody telling the truth about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, a tax structure that is skewed. I didn't hear anything about real tax reform.